going first?
I'll take care of it.
Very good. It's a plan. Good to see you, brother. How you doing?
Good morning, ladies and gents. Please rise for the colors. Post the colors.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Thank you.
Let us pray. Great and mighty God, as we gather here in America's premier city, we gather this day to give thanks and honor the work of Commissioner Lori Sutton, and also to send her relief, Lord, into a job with all of our hopes and our cares. Lord, in this city, where so many left our shores for foreign soil to defend our freedoms, it is fitting this day that we gather and honor Commissioner Sutton. For though she was not born here, she was brought here by your divine hand. And when she set foot on this soil, she claimed her place as a New Yorker. Lord, we thank you for the faithful stewardship she has shown. She is no stranger to starting and beginning new things. And she has given us the foundation to move forward faithfully to all those who have served our country and live in this fine city. Lord, experience and progress are the hallmarks of the stewardship of this position. And so we thank you for all that she has done. And Lord, we remember as well who cares for this caregiver. Who is it, Lord, that is the pillar for her partner, but her own partner, Lori, who helped make the potential possible in this program and who helped recharge her seemingly endless and inexhaustible battery. God, as we say thank you now for a job well done, let them both look back upon this time of faithful service as one in which they were enriched, but even more, let them know they have enriched the lives of others and helped make this city, in their time, indeed great once again. Lord, let her listen to all the words of thankfulness she will hear this day, but most of all, let her hear in the silence of her heart your words, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." In your holy name we pray. Amen. Please remain standing as we now retire the colors.
Please be seated. At this time, I'd like to call up our keynote speaker, Mr. James Brown.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. My name is James A. Brown, a native New Yorker and a proud United States Navy veteran. It's an honor to speak to you today in the very room where the bill was signed that created the Department of Veteran Services. This is because I am a veteran whose life has been turned around and changed because of the program and its initiatives. New York City has led the way in becoming the first city in the country to create an agency dedicated to supporting veterans and their families. After leaving the Navy, where I was stationed in San Diego, I returned to New York and ran a successful music business with my brother. Over time, I fell into the trappings of the music business, indulging in activities I shouldn't have, and eventually, after many years, found myself unable to pay my bills or keep a roof over my head. I ended up in the New York City shelter system for 6 months, where over that period of time, it seemed like I became a number, just a number. But I realized that I still had my ambition, my goals, and my drive, and that's what kept me going. And I never lost faith. But then my shelter director told me about Mayor de Blasio and the signing of the bill that could and would help veterans like me for the first time in a long time and give me something that I desperately needed, which was hope. She connected me with the Department of Veteran Services, and they helped me find a place of my own, a small studio in the Bronx, where I still reside to this day, 4 years later. Even nowadays, even sometimes my days are good, sometimes my days are bad, but I tell you what, there's nothing like being able to take the key and stick it in your own door. There's nothing like it, nothing like that feeling. Having secured my place has allowed me to pursue my passion for cooking. I'm a chef. And eventually, 2 years ago, I started and still maintain my own catering company. One of the milestones of my culinary career was achieved last week. I was asked to be part of the culinary team to cook for the General Assembly to the United Nations. As I stand here, I'm still blown away by that. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to say thank you for what you've done for starting the program and everything that's come with it. I'd like to say also a very special thank you to my friend and mentor, Mr. Tommy Lloyd, and his hardworking staff and his crew that every day go out and make sure and help place veterans. Tommy, I love you and thank you from the bottom of my heart. Also, I cannot forget Commissioner Sutton. I'd like to thank you for just knowing what we needed, what I needed as a veteran. And for that, I will ever, ever be grateful. Thank you very much.
Wow, James, I'm very, very impressed and very moved. I think everyone here is. And I think it's very important that you told people your story today, because here you are, an accomplished man, a fine public speaker, may I add. Everything about you exudes confidence and strength, and yet there's not a one of us who doesn't slip and fall sometimes. And for you to tell your story, I think, helps other people to realize that everyone has a right to the help they need. No one should ever be ashamed of it. Everyone has a chance to turn things around. Especially, that is something we owe to those who have served us. So you've set an extraordinary example today. And I just want to commend you for doing that. I want to commend you for the strength you've shown, the way you've put your life on the track it's on now. You're a role model to all of us. Thank you, James. So we're here because this is a very powerful, special place for our city and for our nation. The Intrepid stands for so much and means so much to all of us. And it exemplifies the strength and resilience of those who serve us. Everyone knows the history of the ship, knows what it went through, but kept coming back. So it's a symbol that's so powerful, and we all feel it very personally, very humanly. And it takes on other meaning for us in different ways. For me personally, this ship immediately reminds me of my dad. This ship, in fact, brought many soldiers to fight on Okinawa, where my dad fought in World War II, and where he lost half his leg and where many of his challenges began. And I think of this ship, I think of the good people who served their country, and then how many of them carried with them thereafter the challenges and the pain because they did the right thing. But the right thing was not done for them in so many cases. And that brings us to 2016. And I want to be clear, even though we're celebrating, there's a lot to celebrate. Lori's leadership and the creation of this department and everyone who works for this department, all the good people they've reached and the new leadership to come, there's a lot to celebrate. But I want to remind people, the fact that we had to create this department is a reminder of something profoundly wrong still. Because our men and women in uniform served our nation. Our nation from that very moment should have been there for them, and it's still not true today. In too many cases, not taking away for a moment the good work of a lot of folks, the Veterans Administration elsewhere, who do help people. I'm speaking to the fact that so many men and women go without the help they need, so many families go without the help they need. The whole idea of helping a veteran is still so incomplete. in America today. And that's why we had to act. And I think this department's going to be here for a long time. But I think on one level, every one of us wished and still wish for the day where it would not be needed. But I think that day's a long way ahead, and we got to keep fighting for it. So what we know is that I think the lesson we kind of were all taught, that the hard part was the time when you served. I think that was not the whole story, to say the least. For a lot of men and women, the time they served was extraordinarily difficult and noble. But equally hard, sometimes even harder, was the time after. And I saw that in my home, and I came to understand that the war doesn't end. For a lot of soldiers, sailors, airmen, a lot of families, the war doesn't end. It stays with them their whole life. And now that we understand that better, all of us, we know it's our job to do everything we can to be there for our veterans. And this department serves an extraordinary number of people. And I think, there may be in people's minds ideas of where veterans live in this country. Well, here is a home to over 200,000 veterans, this city. And this is the place where we need to make a change. And we're trying every day, and I now have the opportunity to praise the work of the founding commissioner, Lori Sutton. Now, I want to start by revealing a fact that I've known for quite a while, but hasn't been brought out publicly, that well-known consumer product, well-known symbol of that product, the Energizer Bunny, yes, was based on the life of Lori Sutton. It's true. Now, they took the Energizer Bunny down a few notches because I didn't think people were ready for the level of energy that Lori Sutton has. There, it's out, Lori. I have often said, and I mean it, I've had so many wonderful experiences working with Lori. And I've said many a time, and I feel it this very day, I want to eat for breakfast whatever she eats for breakfast. Because I don't understand it, but I love it. So her first years leading our Office of Veterans Affairs, and in these last 3 years, initiating and building out our Department of Veterans Services. And I remember our earliest conversations, Lori, and you talked about, with passion, pretty much the only way you talk, you talked about your own experiences in the Army, trying to help the higher-ups understand what was happening to members of the service, and appealing to them to change and understanding that change doesn't come easily. And I saw that fire and I saw that energy you felt, that you didn't accept the status quo, and you were not shocked when a bureaucracy had trouble acknowledging some of the challenges. Well, you took that spirit of not accepting the unacceptable and you put it to work, and with a great team you assembled, and I've had the joy of being with them at events and parades and meetings, and they're just extraordinary people. Let's actually give a big round of applause to all of them. Some of the achievements, just some, that since 2014, we have a 97% drop in street homelessness among veterans to an all-time low level now. And I want everyone to join me in your hearts with a commitment that the words veterans homelessness will someday be abolished and banned and unnecessary, because one thing that does not make sense in our society is that any veteran would ever be homeless. And that's something we all have to aspire to. but we've seen remarkable progress. What you and your team did in creating the Vets Care program to acknowledge and recognize and embrace and support vets who had PTSD. And I say this as the son of a veteran who unquestionably had PTSD. They didn't call it that decades ago, but it was clear as a bell, and it plagued him his whole life. But you are doing a wonderful thing by acknowledging that challenge, embracing those veterans, and then helping them to find the kind of jobs that will sustain them and their family. And the connection with now over 25,000 veterans and their families has been achieved by this office. The fact that there was some place to turn that was compassionate and willing and able to provide help, what a blessing. But those numbers only tell us one piece of the story, and so much more important is the story that James told. One example, and what a powerful one, of what can happen when someone actually gets the help they need, and they're heard, and they're seen, and they're respected. And James, I am so happy to say your story is not the only one. So many others have been helped by our Department of Veterans Services. So, in a second, I'm going to ask Commissioner Sutton to come up and give her valedictory. But again, in addition to thanking everyone from Veterans Services who had her back and took her vision and ran with it and tried to keep up with her, I want to thank someone who's done a lot since he came on board to continue to build out this new department, still new department, and that's our Deputy Mayor, Phil Thompson. Thank you for your leadership, Phil. We've also gotten a lot of support every step along the way from the City Council, and I want to thank them, because when we do our work, we need to do this in partnership. The City Council believes in this department and its work and believes we all need to keep doing more, and I want to thank the chair of the Veterans Committee in the Council, Councilmember Chaim Deutsch. Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember, I know you're upset because you thought the Energizer Bunny was based on you, but you're a close second. I've seen you in action. You're a close second. And I also want to acknowledge some of the folks who are gathered with us here today for this very important moment. First of all, they've done a lot of great work, and we're elevating one of their members today, the New York City Veterans Advisory Board. Let's thank all of them. And let's thank an extraordinary organization that means so much to our veterans, the United War Veterans Council. And an organization that acknowledges how much we need to give all veterans the education and training opportunities they deserve. An organization that we're pleased to have here, including the founding member, or founder, I should say, Jerry Byrne. Let's welcome Veterans on Campus. So, Lori, I don't have enough words. There are not enough words in the English language to describe you and all you've done here. But I just want to thank you. This has been a joy. We saw eye to eye from the beginning, literally, and everything, every job you took on, every assignment, you did it with heart and joy and passion and a can-do attitude, and it got done, and great things ahead. Thank you, Laurie.
Thank you so much. Mr. Mayor, thank you so much. Thank you for your confidence. Thank you for your support. Thank you and Shirlane for just giving me and my team and our community of veterans everything we've needed to be able to support our veterans like James Brown. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your leadership. Now, I know that a lot of you all thought that you were coming here today for the launch of our 3-year startup report. Well, we are, gang. It's on the website. I wanted to sleep with this under my pillow last night. Lori told me that would be taking it a little far, but this is something we are so proud of. It's taken a team of teams, not just the wonderful members of our team DVS, and I'll tell you, Jeff Roth is our deputy. We've been the mom and dad of this organization and our wingmen. Thank you so much for your leadership. And that brings us to today's ceremony. Isn't that great, the sounds of freedom? We got little David, and we got little Grace, and we got Christine here, and we got Daddy Ulysses. James, you've done well. Welcome here to the Intrepid. Thank you so much. And that comes to Susan, you, and Dave. Thank you for your hospitality. You have been so welcoming to me and my team, our entire community. This is sacred ground. As the mayor said, it makes him think of his father, and all of us think of those to whom we owe so much. There have been times over the last 5 years where I've really felt like perhaps I should start paying rent to the Intrepid, because we've just had so much time here and done so much for so many, and the best of all is that we've just begun. Thank you for your hospitality, all you give to this city. Now, I gotta tell you, gang, when Lori and I first came to New York City 6 years ago now, we came as a grand adventure. We came as partners. We became Brooklynites to begin with. I got it right after all this time, Mr. Mayor. And what we didn't understand was what we would actually find once we got here. We found a home, we found a community, we found purpose, we found meaning. We found a place where we felt like we belonged. And Mr. Mayor, you'll remember this. You were there 3 years ago on that just amazing day, the Pride March, 3 days after the Supreme Court decision, in which, after the moment of silence, honoring all who had not lived long enough to see that day, and whisked under the security guard, I was down on bended knee. Will you marry me? And Mr. Mayor, she said yes. That's the law. And so when I was spreading the great news, I had to reach out to my battle buddy of the last 15 years, Gary Trudeau, the archangel of Walter Reed, who has chronicled with perfect pitch the experiences of our veterans and their families since 9/11. Gary introduced me and Lori, and so when I told him we were engaged, he said, "Oh, don't I get to be the groomsmaid?" And I said, "Better yet, it's your fault. You're going to marry us." And marry us you did. Thank you. God bless you, Gary Trudeau. And that brings us to where we are today. This ceremony today, led by firefighter Mike and his A-list FDNY Honor Guard. How about a big round of applause for them? Sergeant Major Escalante, great Marine that you are, hoorah, thank you for being here today. And our very own Tanya Thomas. Thank you, Tanya. For any of you who may be wondering, from whence does Tanya draw her passion, her soul, her self to her music? Tanya is one of our Gold Star spouses. She leads our caregiver initiatives, and God bless Tanya. We cannot thank you enough. Now, Chaplain Sears, you know that you're not going to be left out of this. Chaplain Sears, in his prayer, referenced New York City as a premier city, which it is. It's a fine city, and it's also a United States Coast Guard city. Hua, thank you so much. One of my favorite lines over the last 5 years was when the Commandant of the Coast Guard was here when we had a ceremony designating New York City as a Coast Guard city, and the mayor starts out and says, "Now, Mr. Commandant, 4-star general here." He says, "I want you to know that New York City has been, is now, and will always be a Coast Guard city." Glad you got around to it. So thank you so much, Chaplain Sears. Bring the word back. Thank you very much. Deputy Mayor Thompson, you and your Dana have embraced me and my Lori, and I gotta tell you, our best is still yet ahead. Thank you for your leadership, your vision, everything that you brought to this, and I know that under James's leadership, DVS is gonna continue going higher, further, farther than we ever dreamt possible. Thank you so much. Tell you, is this timing or what? Sweet Grace, just at the time that I'm about ready to embarrass her daddy, is grabbing onto him, and James, you are demonstrating by your example, by your family, by your life of service, and by your contributions already to our community. First as the NYU Futures Lab Director, member of our Veterans Advisory Board, and you got little David there next to Grace and Christine and Dad Ulysses. How about another big round of applause for James? Okay, gang. So I just have to thank you enough. I cannot thank you enough. I'm looking around the room here. I see Dominic Yezzo, I see Ed Schloman, I see Stephanie Richmond, Jerry. So many of you, Vince and Doug. It just keeps getting better. And I feel a little bit right now. Yes, I am energized, Mr. Mayor, and it's because of people like this, a community like this, leadership like yours, and James, yes, you're the guy that I work with, and the other James, you're the guy that I love seeing little David in your arms. So thank you all for all that you've given to me and Lori. This is now our home. We're not going anywhere. We've lived more here in New York City than any other place in our adult lives. We love our city. We love its traditions, its culture, its arts, its quirks, its characters, and its traditions. So let's just say, I feel a little bit like Churchill after the Battle of Britain. You didn't see that coming, did you, Mr. Mayor?
It's a long way from Energizer Bunny.
It is. But when he said, "This is not the end. This is not the beginning of the end, but it is perhaps the end of the beginning." Let us continue to march forward. Let's continue to keep our eyes on the prize. Service is our North Star. We will meet again on the high ground. I'll be the one with the big grin. God bless you all. Thank you.
Yes, you will. Well done, Lori. Well, Lori has set the stage perfectly for the passing of the torch. And you can imagine, as we at City Hall discussed who would be the right successor to Lori Sutton. I'm reminded of the famous dialogue. Do you know the famous story of Thomas Jefferson going to France as the United States ambassador, and the French official who greeted him upon arrival, and the previous ambassador had been Ben Franklin, and the French official who greeted him upon arrival said, "Ah, Mr. Jefferson, you are Mr. Franklin's replacement." And Jefferson said, "No, I am not Mr. Franklin's replacement. I am merely his successor." So I don't think there is another Lori Sutton in the universe, but
We can all be glad.
but we have a successor who is extraordinary. And I agree with Lori that the beginning has been achieved over these last 3 years. But now it is a time to take this agency even farther, because there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of people to be reached. And we've seen how much can be done by our Department of Veterans Services, and we know that there's even more out there. So as we contemplated who should lead this department, well, we thought about someone who understands family, as he's proving right now. I give you credit. Cool under pressure. But we also really thought about someone who could relate and feel experiences deeply of all those that he would serve. And as I got to know Colonel James Hendon, I appreciate a lot of pieces of his story. I appreciate that he's someone who very early on showed tremendous leadership. And when he was chosen to go to West Point, it was not because he was someone who was connected or part of an old military family. He was someone of just extraordinary promise. And he's shown even in his earliest years through. And then he served this country in both Iraq and Afghanistan. And the stories he told me of dealing with the complexities of those theaters of war and what it took to lead his troops in that circumstance. To me, it was sobering and eye-opening and humbling, and a reminder of what people can summon in themselves when confronted with extraordinary challenges. And then upon returning, having a vision of wanting to do so much more for the world. And I think James Hendon and Lori Sutton have this great commonality of there is no such thing as enough service. And there is no such thing as mission accomplished. There's always another mission. So James Hendon came back, got the kind of training that we all believe our veterans deserve, started his own company to do good, and then did even more as a founding director of the NYU Veterans Lab, helping veterans to become entrepreneurs and start their own businesses and have the kind of livelihoods they deserve. And as a member of our Veterans Advisory Board, building out this department. He is, by his experience, by his intellect, by his drive, he has become a national leader on helping veterans to come home and to reach their full potential after their military service is done. And that spirit, that experience, that vision is what we need as we move forward. Colonel Hendon, we're going to look to you to reach a lot of people with this extraordinary team. And as we heard with the amazing story of James Brown, we're going to measure success by the lives we make better. And you know a lot about that already, and you're going to bring all that here. Now, if your wingman there will release you for a moment. An excellent transition. That was symbolic. It's now my pleasure to introduce the next commissioner for the Department of Veteran Services, Colonel James Hendon. First you get a hug. First you get a hug.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Giving honors and salutations to Mayor Blasio, to Deputy Mayor Thompson, to Commissioner Sutton, Chairman of the city's Veterans Committee, Councilmember Deitch, and members of the Veterans Advisory Board, and distinguished guests. I'm honored to accept this appointment to serve as the next commissioner for the Department of Veteran Services. And as Commissioner Sutton will say, there's a saying in the military that we don't promote individuals based on performance alone, but based on potential. That being said, I'm so grateful that you see potential in me as a servant and as a steward of this awesome organization, sir. It's already been said, but to reiterate, some of the finest people you will see in this city and the world are housed within DVS. Please, let's give them a hand. Like many members of the veterans community and our allies, a feeling of appreciation for this great nation and a compulsion to serve are in my DNA. Funny thing is, when I was a child, many moons ago, but maybe David Grace's age, I would have been the last person to tell you that I would be standing here right now. I was born in Miami, Florida in 1980. For those who are of age, you might remember this about the time of the McDuffie riots. My father tells me that shortly after I was born in December, the last verdict acquitting one of the officers involved was announced and more riots broke out. So on the way home from the hospital, he had to take me, so, newborn, and just hold me out of the window of the car so that rioters would not flip the vehicle. And this wasn't us driving from one neighborhood, passing through a neighborhood to get where we needed to go. This was us heading home. This is where we lived at the time. And, fast forward, I've always had love within the places where I've stayed, within the homes where I've lived, and amongst the people who live with me. But, I kept changing homes, kept changing households and living arrangements after my parents got divorced. So for me, between grandparents and aunts and parents, there was a handful of places where I could stay at a given time at night. So you keep changing spots, and, you get these times where you wake up at night, it's dark, you don't know where you are, and you realize, oh, this is where I am, and it just got at me, and this is, me as a kid. The things that stood out to me throughout those times, and the other piece of it was just constantly changing schools also when I was young. The things that stood out to me was gratitude and zip codes. For gratitude, when you see a lot of things and move around a great deal, you don't take for granted what you have. To this day, I tell my wife, Christine, who is here today, my compass, I tell her thank you for even little things. So just thank you for food. We might get some pizza from a place down the street, and she'll give me a plate, or more likely, I will go get myself a plate, and I'll say thank you, honey, so much for this pizza. That's just who I am, and I tell her how much I appreciate her, that I love her. Same thing happens with my kids, with Grace, with David. Grace will open a door for me, and I'll just say thank you so much. I'm just so grateful, because I think when you come from certain settings, you just develop this deep appreciation, and the thoughts on gratitude especially extend to my time in military service. I think this is an incredible country that we live in, and warts and all, America is the best place on earth, in my opinion, and it's worth defending, it's worth fighting for. And with that in mind, when I was of age, when I was old enough, put my right hand up and swore to protect, to serve this Constitution, ultimately defend it when becoming an officer. I think that all people should serve in some way, be it military service or otherwise, but some way, because we have so much to give. As far as zip codes, so I moved around so much and I attended so many different places that I started to see this disconnect between certain lives and others just based on where you live and where you grow up. And when you travel so much and you're young and you see these outcomes, it just forged within me a desire to serve and to help people connect dots to be able to get to a better place. This is something that is a theme throughout my life. My theory of the case is that life is like a race, a track. Picture a track, several lanes, you've got different people running in their own lane. I believe that based on your religion, based on your race, based on your creed, based on your military affiliation, based on your sexual orientation, based on your disability status, that you start at a different place on this track. And everything that I care about is how do we connect the dots so that everyone can be at that starting line. That applies to not only members of the veterans community, but just all who are within this mantle. This focus on empowerment, it's within everything that I do, from teaching ROTC at CUNY, to mentoring students at the Eagle Academy in the Bronx, to helping faith centers perform energy efficiency retrofits, first while at Block Power, and then within my own business, to leveraging my expertise in entrepreneurship to helping other veterans and spouses of veterans launch their own businesses at NYU's Veterans Future Lab. I just keep trying to move this ball forward on the same theory of the case of getting people to that starting line. I told the mayor when we last spoke that my efforts in DVS would continue the work that started years ago when I was asked to lead that Veterans Incubator for NYU. The goal is to expand coalitions within the veteran community that can be mobilized to come together and act for the greater good of all of us while tackling these challenges through an innovation lens. Outstanding work is already being done by Commissioner Sutton and her team, the unsung world-class heroes of DVS, to build the lines of action as we see them. Everything from housing to engagement, to administrative activities and various other services. The mechanism, the vehicle already exists to fulfill DVS's mission, which is to foster purpose-driven lives in New York City's service members, veterans, and their families. I'm not here to reinvent the wheel or to fix what is not broken. My job is to assure that as many veterans and allies of our community as possible are aware of what we do, that they support our efforts. To use a football analogy, everybody hits, nobody quits, we win. To be clear, I'm not just speaking of the people in this room. Many leaders in the veteran community are here right now, and we honor you and everything that you've done in front of and behind the scenes to get us to where we are today. I am speaking of all of New York City's 208,000 veterans and those who care about them, those who love them. Innovation comes to the table because in the tradition of General Sutton, we will do everything that we can to continue to experiment and leverage all resources around us, people, processes, technology, as we learn what does and does not work in our efforts to connect, mobilize, and empower the city's veteran population. Do these things, and we continue to move the needle forward towards achieving functional zero and combating veterans' homelessness. Do these things, and we continue to increase the number of positive outcomes that vets have when working with our engagement and community support team. Do these things, and we amplify our ability to help veterans not only help themselves land jobs, but to also start and grow their own successful ventures. As I learned at the Veterans Future Lab, these former leaders in a military context are fire in a bottle, game changers in the economic development space. It is 2019. I'm telling you, our full potential is not yet tapped. Do these things, and more veterans receive the tools that we need to win the greatest, longest lasting, and most acute battle that many of us ever face, the battle within our minds. All of this is Commissioner Sutton's legacy. We will especially honor Vets Thrive NYC and the Core 4 model, just with a small twist. We want to significantly amplify the engagement and connection aspects at the base of the model. In layman's terms, if we continue to strengthen the bonds within New York City's veteran community, cutting across all socioeconomic and demographic canvases, then we will help the community further heal itself. Step one in fostering purpose-driven lives for veterans in New York City is to pay heed to the refrain, all I need is a friend. I officially start in a few weeks, but prior to then, I will conduct a listening tour and gain a better feel of the nooks and crannies of where we can grow on top of what DVS has already accomplished in its first 3 years. That being said, ideas are important, but execution is 9/10 of the game. Over and over again, I've witnessed entrepreneurs thrive, not because they were brilliant, not because they gave a good speech or had good connections, not because of their resumes, and definitely not because they looked a certain part. I have seen leaders thrive, including a lot of the people in this room. I'm talking about folks from the top of the chain all the way to the bottom, because they were able to execute. In my old job, I like to say action is currency. In this new position, I'll start saying the words, let the work talk. That is what we at DVS will continue to do. Despite any issues surrounding us, despite any challenges we face, and once again, I'm not just speaking about DVS, I'm speaking of all city veterans. We will remain grateful for all that we are, for all that we have, for all that we can be as we help one another. We will be mindful of the city's 178 zip codes, I counted, and the need to empower our veterans to close the gap where necessary so that they can start at that starting line in order to fit in. I've been an entrepreneur long enough to know, I think some people will agree with me when I say this, no one gives you anything. Be wary of someone offering to give you something for nothing in the world that precedes our military service. True, lasting success must be earned. You just heard James talk about he started his business. We helped him connect the dots to have housing. He connected the dots for himself to have his business and cook it at UN. I want to try some of his chicken, by the way. I'm going to tell him that offline. That's a whole other thing. Sorry, I'm just thinking about that while you were talking. I know you got good chicken. What I'm trying to say is DVS cannot give you dignity, but I recognize that all of this is about dignity. Dignity, it's an undercurrent of things. I'm talking about economic access, housing, mental health, you name it. It's the idea that you're on top of things, that you remain proactive and not reactive, the idea that you are in control. We're going to do everything in our power to facilitate our veteran community having the tools to build that reality. We're going to stand on the shoulders on the good work of this administration, of the inimitable qualities of this city, and on warrior ethos as it pertains to veterans and military families in pursuit of our objective. As we do all of that, I'm going to turn around and I'm going to ask you to continue to give, because as was already said here today, this is never over. Generations of veterans sacrificed for us to be here, to have the infrastructure, the benefits, and the community that we have, for us to not be in the shadows, for us as a group to exist. It is now our turn to steward the present while making contributions towards tomorrow. Post-military service, if everyone takes and no one gives, and when I say give, I'm speaking of anything you have, anything from time, talent, resources, whatever you can give. If everyone takes and no one gives, then we as a body will fade away. To quote JFK, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. The challenge did not stop when we took the uniform off. It simply evolved. We will succeed, but these things do not happen by themselves. I challenge everyone here and outside of the Intrepid right now to do your part to fight for what we have, to fight for our future, and to fight for one another. I told my story, but every single person here has gone through something in and out of the military. We have come this far. And for me, as someone who was born into a riot, literally, and turned out okay, I can assure you that we will be all right. Thank you.
That was absolutely beautiful, Colonel Hendon, and I want to say you have mystical powers because your son cooperated and stayed calm for that entire speech. So, we're about to have a benediction, and then we will go to the press questions. I just want to say that Colonel Hendon momentarily has another appointment that he made a while back to serve veterans that he has to get to. So after the benediction, we're going to do questions about this appointment quickly. Make sure we get those done while you're still here, and then, of course, we'll go to other questions as well. But first, the benediction.
Thank you. Let us pray. Great and mighty God, as we close out this proceeding, we ask once again your blessing and your guidance on Lori and all the things that she has done, not only for this city, but most of all for its veterans. And we ask this day as well that you fortify Colonel Hendon. For long ago in Miami, he could not have dreamed of this day, that you would call him, but you have girded him and guided him each day, that he might stand here accepting this appointment and the challenge that lies ahead. Let him not be known as a successor, but let him be known for the successes that he creates through his staff and his people for all of the veterans of this city. For we need him not to be intimidated, but inspired by those who have come before. We need him not to be the next position holder, but to provide next level leadership for all of the veterans in this city. Indeed, we need him to be the man, the Marine, and the mission leader that will finally bring, Lord, the things that veterans need. For there are too many Jane Browns and James Browns in this city even now. For all that we have done, we know there is much more to do. Veterans who have honored our nation and served our nation, it is now time for our nation to serve them. God, we ask for his future success. We ask for celebration for General Sutton. And God, most of all, we ask that this day, in ways big and small, that veterans around this city are known not only for their service, God, but are known for the way that we reach out and care for each one. For all these things spoken, and for the unspoken things in the silence of our hearts, we ask your blessing fall upon them and your will be done through them. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Okay, please be seated, everybody. Let's take questions from the media on the appointment of Colonel Hendon and anything else DVS related, please.
I wanted to ask you, Mayor Blasio, you took a lot of, through your reporting at the time of the launch of this agency, you were really reluctant about it. I guess help some of the issues facing the veterans community. There was months of negotiation and veterans groups. Have you been kind of convinced about the benefits?
Oh, long since. In the beginning, we wanted to make sure we could get it right. And we wanted to make sure if we created something, it would really be value added. It's not a shock to know that sometimes good people think creating a new vehicle will be an achievement unto itself. What I've learned in my experience is you got to construct it in a way that's actually going to reach people and be value added and achieve the things that the federal government was not. And that was really one of the big questions. Could we fill that gap? Could we do it responsibly? Could we do it effectively? I'm very satisfied by what's been achieved. I think beyond what we all thought could be done in 3 years. So absolutely yes. Anything else on the appointment today or on Veterans Services? Yes.
Questions for the new commissioner. Can you say what you view after homelessness numbers have gone down so much? What do you view as the biggest challenge for veterans in the city?
I think one of the biggest challenges is just employment, as far as just access to economic opportunities and upward mobility in that realm. So, I really want to pay heed to the continued work of the Veteran Success Network that DVS has and other efforts that we can do on the entrepreneurship side as well, so that folks are agile between navigating things in a typical business lens with jobs, but also within the lens of starting one's own nonprofit, one's own for-profit venture.
Issues I wanted to ask you about. There's legislation out there to rename the Manhattan VA Hospital in honor of Margaret Corbin. There's legislation out there to rename the Manhattan VA Hospital in honor of Margaret Corbin. What's your stance on that?
I got to say, I don't have a stance at this time. Please forgive me. So I'm just getting right into things. So just, yeah, I'm sorry.
Any thoughts? Like, there's like a recent court case saying the federal government has to reimburse veterans for out-of-pocket medical expenses. Anything else on that?
Same thing in that I'm just getting right into all the different issues as far as, holding on the mantle that General Sutton so greatly held. So I'm not at this time, but once I'm in the chute, please come back at me and we'll definitely be able to respond to those things. So, yeah.
Let me know before we go on to stay up here, that on the question of employment, I'm so glad that Colonel Hendon's focused on this, something I've spoken about at a lot of gatherings internally and externally. City of New York, we talked about that during the interview. The City of New York needs to go farther in terms of employing veterans. We do some good work. We need to go farther. The private sector, too. And we really need to call the private sector to conscience here to take on more serious commitments to hiring veterans. And as Lori educated me very early on, and their spouses, because both matter deeply. Go ahead, Rich.
When does he take office? When do you take office?
My first official day will be November 1st. So.
I wanted to ask about the Veteran Resource Centers. There's one in every borough, but they're only operating part-time, about 10 hours a week. And it seems to be an important way to engage veterans. The website, VetConnect, hasn't been engaging as many veterans as I think the department is like. Why aren't the resource centers operating in a greater capacity?
So the question is about our veteran resource centers. We now have one in every borough in addition to our hub headquarters in Lower Manhattan. Listen, what we are doing with those veteran resource centers, and I want to just give a nod to Chair Deitch and his support and advocacy for them, is we are not only available at posted hours, and you can see the hours and the locations on our website in our 3-year report, but we also go to where the veterans are. We go to where they live. We go to their VSO headquarters. We go to their events, to their barbecues, to their churches. We go to the VAs, the vet centers, and that's equally as important a task for us in being out in the community as it is to have, yes, a predictable set up hours. That is one part of the menu of services that we provide. Thank you for that question.
Department's budget, the department's budget in the past fiscal year has risen by 70%, but there was a slight decline in homeless veterans getting housing or any other types of services. Some activists have told us that they felt it was because you were out of town too much campaigning. What would you attribute it to?
With all due respect, that's a nonsensical question. Would you like to add, Lori?
No, absolutely. First of all, the budget. I came into this position as commissioner first 5 years ago as the commissioner of the Mayor's Office of Veterans Affairs. Now, to understand a little bit about the history, this office was set up thanks to the advocacy of folks like Vince McGowan and others who came back from Vietnam. They pounded on the doors of City Hall, and Mayor Koch in the late 80s heard them and stood up the office. But then for, nearly 30 years, mayors on both sides of the political aisle just kind of let this little office languish in place. Great people who worked there, certainly giants upon whose shoulders I stand and now James will stand. But when I came on board, we were called the Office of Flags and Tags. Flags for Memorial Day and tags for burials. It was a disgrace. And fortunately, there was a convergence of leadership that started with the mayor and the first lady and their very personal experience. All 4 members of their parental family, both moms, both dads, served in World War II, as the mayor has said so eloquently and in such a poignant manner. His father, like so many veterans, brought the war home with him. Fortunately, We also had partnership in the City Council, first with Chair Eric Ulrich and then Speaker Melissa Mark Vivarito, and on to the current day, we've got Chair Deitch here, and the current speaker have been supportive as well. On the budget, we had, well, let's just put it this way. We had 4 people on board, great people on board when we started out 3 years ago. Today, we have 40 people on board. So yes, there is an increase in budget. We had a reputation that really was unworthy of a city like New York. If veterans and their families were fortunate enough to find us, and Letitia and Inez, some of our stalwart pioneers, many of you in this room know of their tireless efforts, and Commissioner Handy and so many others. But I will tell you, today, because of these investments and because of the advocacy of veteran service organizations, family members, our academic partners, our private, not-for-profit, and social sector partners, and yes, our veteran service organization leaders, this convergence of leadership led to that ceremony 3 years ago in December here on this very deck of the Intrepid. And today, we took on the biggest problem that veterans and their families talk about no matter where you go. It's about navigating to connect with quality resources, care, and services. Vet Connect NYC now is the nation's leading model that connects with 18 other cities under the America Serves model, and it's continuing to grow. We are now working with Teachers College on an ETS sponsorship program, which is connecting with service members and their families before they come here. You heard what we've done with homelessness. We're continuing to work on that. Nicole Branca is right here. I will tell you, we have established a system that has allowed us to maintain a steady state, and we are working tirelessly both on the supply side and the demand side to increase the number of veterans like James Brown who can find themselves a home and can continue to flourish. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to clarify that issue that you raised. Thank you.
Hold on 1 second, I'm sorry, we'll come right back to you. Just want to see if there's anything else for Colonel Hendon, because he does need to catch a flight to a veterans event.
Excuse me, I was just wondering if you just clarify.
I'm coming to you, but let me just see if there's anything else for Colonel Hendon, and then we will happily come back to you.
I just wanted to ask, do you view the federal government as a reliable partner, not only in the chaos of the Trump administration now, there's also been reports, from the start of the administration that he's stacked the game with cronies, the Mar-a-Lago crowd. So what are your thoughts on that?
I'll come back to that, but is there anything for Colonel Hendon? He really does.
And I think it's just what I said in my speech, and that here at DVS we will let the work talk. We will put one foot in front of the other, do everything that we can to fulfill our mission within the agency and work with all around us, and not get bogged down in any other issues aside from the direct idea of assisting veterans and helping them foster the purpose-driven lives, helping folks help themselves. So, yeah.
All right. Thank you, Colonel. Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, continue. Go ahead.
Just clarify what you attribute that slight decline to that you cited from the mayor's management report.
Yeah, that's not how you asked it, so don't play around. But we'll happily ask that. We'll answer that question because it's not a ridiculous question. Go ahead.
I think the best answer to that question, I would refer any of you and all of you to our 3-year report. It is currently on the website, and you will see that there are thousands of veterans today, like James Brown and so many others, who are getting services that they wouldn't have gotten just a very short time ago. And best of all, we've just begun. The execution, the mission, the passion, the drive, the leadership, it will continue and take us to places that other cities are already contacting us to emulate. So we can be very proud of that. Thank you.
Commissioner, you mentioned the report
Okay, so for any of you who have ever started up an organization, and I did that in the Department of Defense, I've done it here, it's one of the reasons why I urged caution on the mayor early on, because I knew what it was like to start a new organization from nothing. Expectations are sky high, but yet you're in the weeds of trying to figure out, where are the computers, where is our budget code, who are the people we're going to hire. We've gone from 4 people to 40 people in 3 years at the same time that we have continued our homelessness mission. We have stood up our community engagement teams. And so what you will see is that in the mayor's management report that, in the first 3 years of any startup, as you focus on certain areas, and our engagement has been one of those, we realized a year and a half ago that what we really needed to do was we need to incorporate both our whole health team with our engagement and employment team, so it would be one community team because we care for the whole veteran. So it took us a little time to be able to do the training, the consolidation, and so you'll see that in the numbers there was a period in there that it was that the numbers varied. And I think, in fact, I know there is no doubt in my mind that as you see continued mayor's management reports on our reports with the legislation and all that we've got going forward, that this is a great news story getting better and better all the time. So thank you for that question.
Veterans, a very crucial thing, decreasing services, particularly mental health services for veterans, is due to startup fluctuation or?
You speak to mental health, I'll speak to homelessness.
So there's been no decrease in mental health services for our veterans. What we have experienced, and we're continuing to work with our developers, our landlords, our folks around the city, is to be able to create that system, which we have, that takes a homeless veteran like James Brown, from the time they're placed into the shelter system to the time that they get a permanent home, an apartment, less than 90 days. When we started this journey, it was 5, 6, 7, 800, 900 days or more. And so it's that system, it's the need that we are there for veterans, whatever they need. Vet Connect NYC is the next step up. And I will tell you, just so you know what to expect going forward, these first 3 years, I don't think we could have worked much harder. That's what it took. Last time the city stood up an agency, 15, 20 years ago. No institutional memory. We're leaving a template now with OMB and the mayor's office. The next time this is done, we'll know more what to expect going forward, and that's a good thing. But now what Colonel Hendon will be charged to do, and I'm so excited about this, going forward, is to now bring together a smart system, an artificial intelligence data analytics system, which we're already working with the Mayor's Office of Operations to bring together all of these building blocks that creates the system that makes it really easy for a veteran or family member to get connected and really, really hard to fall through the cracks. Thank you.
So I just wanted to add that we have expanded staff for placing homeless veterans and helping them find housing. And it's always a dynamic situation because, as the mayor said, it's not just what we do, it's also the private sector. Veterans are not the only people finding themselves unable to afford housing in New York City. And the reason for that is that there's a lot of real estate speculation. A lot of, housing is hard for people to find and maintain. And so it's always a dynamic situation. But we have expanded services recently to help with that. The other thing I want to say, Commissioner Sutton actually went further than I was going to go on this, but we are doing some really exciting things that will become public soon on the employment side for veterans. Because if you don't have a job, nothing is affordable. And I think we're about to launch something which is state-of-the-art, not just for veterans, but for connecting people, period, into employment. And she let a little bit of it out. But we are tackling the homelessness issue not only from the housing angle and placement in housing, but also on the other side, which is the income side. And also, the new commissioner said entrepreneurship. And so we're approaching it from all these different angles to really try and get at the source of the problem.
Okay, anything else related to DVS before we go to other topics? Yes?
As a Ghostwatch spouse, we will take it to New York City.
I'm going to take what you're saying, but it is media questions right now. Would it be okay to see you afterwards? Okay, I'll see you after. Any other media questions? DVS? Yes?
Can the commissioner talk a little bit more about why she's leaving at this moment?
Talk a little bit more about?
Talk about why she's leaving at this moment. Sure. And also, early on, when the department was formed, there was a criticism from advocates that they didn't feel there was enough direct impact from City Hall communication. So can you talk about that over the past 2 years?
So the question is to talk about some of the criticism over the last several years, as well as why I might be thinking of moving on at this point in my tenure. Let me take the first one first. You know, we have the world's best advocate community for veterans and their families here in New York City. And they have their role and we have our role. They make us better, we make them better. And so over the last several years, you bet, we've had some very pointed discussions with our advocates. We've learned from them, they've learned from us. That process will continue as it should. But I will tell you, I want to just turn back to James Brown. When we hear from our veterans and are reminded, like James has said, how he got his life back, his pride, his confidence back, we're reminded he's the guy we work for, and we will always measure our success based on how well we support his future, his spirit, and his ongoing contributions. Now, in terms of my situation, I will tell you, I have been in this position for longer, 5 years and 2 months, longer than I've been in any other position in my entire career. And I have given it everything I possibly have. And you know, as a leader, it's important for us to know when is it time for an infusion of new energy and an infusion of new expertise and new ideas to take things to the next level. Well, I hope you saw with James Hendon today that he is that leader, and I'm going to exhale and just figure out how can I continue to serve. And that's as much as I'll say on that. Thank you so much for the question, though.
Last call, anything on DVS, and then we'll turn to general questions. Last call, okay. Media questions on anything else? Yes.
I wanted to ask you about the Imagine.
Actually, I think standing up would help me hear you.
I wanted to ask you about the Imagine Schools initiative that you guys announced today.
Yeah.
So I have a bunch of questions, but I think the biggest one is sort of what do you imagine this initiative doing, or how do you imagine it being different from what schools are already doing? There's some stuff, you know, your office has said that it's going to be innovative, but what does reimagine really mean for these spaces?
I think the power of this announcement is, first of all, you know, we're bringing in substantial resources to determine how to make our public schools better. And I think this says something about how we've changed as a city. I'm someone who believes in public education. I believe in traditional public schools and what they mean in our society and what they should aspire to be for our communities. We are not there yet, which is why we have the equity and excellence vision. We have a whole transformation we have to go through. I think in the past, there was sort of a fault line where there were a number of well-intentioned people who were not sure that traditional public schools could work. And there were different ideas about, you know, maybe very specific ways that they only could work. And we challenged that from the beginning. And both my chancellors have believed fundamentally as educators that a whole range of traditional public schools can work, and that is the future. So this announcement today provides us with resources and expertise to determine how to make our public schools better for the future. including in some of the communities where we've had, as a city, the least success previously. And to re-engineer those schools, or in some cases start new schools, to answer sort of the essential question: why, in some communities, has public education not succeeded the way it should have? And I'm very excited about this because I think it's going to be part of how we crack the code and come up with new models that are the vision of the future.
Can you say where these schools are going to be, and if the city's going to have to close schools to make space for the new ones?
So that is not the assumption to begin with. The where it's going to be, there'll be a process obviously to determine where the fit is best. Remember, some of this is re-engineering existing schools. Some of it is starting new schools. That doesn't always have to come with a closure. It can come sometimes with a closure, but it doesn't have to. I think if you've been watching the situation, I'm sure we've announced from our previous efforts around renewal schools, et cetera, we've announced the schools that are going to close. We've announced the schools that are going to continue to work in different ways. So I think in terms of thinking about this, I'd say re-engineering some schools in place, starting some new schools just to start new schools, because we think there's a need and a demand in certain places. In some cases, could be connected to a closure, but that's not an assumption. Yeah.
So some activists have concerns, public school advocates worry that, I guess, billionaires have too much say in public school policy. I know you have many opinions on billionaires. Do you think that this new school plan will give them too much influence?
I like billionaires. I just want them to pay their fair share in taxes. No, I think this is about a coming together of different strands. You know, when you look at the foundation world, they've evolved quite a bit. And I give them a lot of credit. This doesn't happen to involve the Gates Foundation, but Bill Gates, to his credit, actually acknowledged over the years that some of his original assumptions about education were wrong, and he came to different views. And the foundations we're working with here have embraced the notion that we've got to work on public education, that the numerical reality alone, the moral imperative is strong enough. This is the future of this city and of this country. But the numerical reality was always clear, that this is where the vast majority of kids were going to be educated. And so I think it shows that people sort of move toward each other and willing to work together to go to where the need is greatest, which is in some of our traditional public schools that really need transformation, and I think this will allow us to do it. But I think look, it's a huge contribution, which we appreciate, and certainly there had to be some agreement on vision. But I don't think that's undue by any measure, because if we had not felt comfortable that the ideas were consistent with our values, we wouldn't have accepted the plan. Go ahead.
There's a shelter on West 107th Street where women live. The women are being transferred out. They're being told at the very last minute, within a day or two, to move out. And the community is up in arms because they say they have worked and embraced this shelter. Can you explain why that decision was being made?
I can't tell you the specifics of this one at this hour. We can get you more detail today. But I can tell you the broad situation. First of all, I commend the community for embracing and supporting that shelter. The reality of what's happening with our homeless population, even though our shelter population has gone down recently, the composition of the shelter population keeps changing. And one of the things we've seen is that we have different types of people at different times, and different times of the year, and year by year that changes. So we have to adjust to the people we are here to serve, while simultaneously, as you know, getting out of those old cluster scatter site buildings, getting out of as many of the pay-per-day hotels as we can. So that leaves us only so many options, and we have to make adjustments according to who we have to serve. But we'll get you a more detailed answer. Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, in light of the recent death of an NYPD officer, what questions does that raise surrounding firearms?
What questions raised? What was the last part?
Surrounding firearm training for NYPD officers.
I've spoken to Commissioner O'Neill about this extensively. There's a very thorough review going on right now of what happened in this tragedy, and it's horribly painful. I was at the hospital with Chief Monahan and others when we told the family that Brian passed away, and it's a horribly painful situation. And we are going through a full review and going to, from that review, determine what needs to change in training. And clearly there has to be some additional approach to training here, and we have to get that right.
You're going to make it a nominee to the TLC. I'm also wondering if you feel like no one really wants to talk about whether the difficulties in the taxing.
No, it's an ongoing conversation with the council. And look, I think overall there's a very good partnership, relationship between the council and the mayor's office. We're always going to have some differences, but if you just look day by day at the way things get done, we ultimately get there on a whole host of things. So they've raised real concerns. We want to answer those concerns, and that's an ongoing discussion, but I don't have any doubt we'll get it done. Relatively soon. I can't give you an exact. Right there, coming to you. We're going right to left. Go ahead.
I wanted to ask you about the parking situation at Brooklyn Borough Hall. There's been kind of a long-standing agreement to allow the Brooklyn Borough President's office to park in the public plaza there, which is technically parkland, even though they have 13 on-street spots. And your administration has kind of continued that arrangement. Why is that a good use of a public space like that?
I'm not an expert on that location. I've been there plenty of times, but I'm not an expert on what the history is or any of that. Look, I think the central question is we've got to make sure that where there's a valid need for official parking, it's covered, and where we don't need it, then we don't need it. And that's the assessment we have to make. Honestly, having been a public servant in Brooklyn for a long, long time, I haven't heard a lot of people concerned about that particular situation. But we'll look at it, and if there's any adjustments that should be made, we'll make them. But I don't have a strong view right now on that.
Yesterday, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez came out against the city's plan to close Rikers, and I'm curious if you're changing any of the way you're sort of advocating. Are you confident it's going to pass the council?
Yeah, I'm confident. I want to commend the council, and this is over 2 speakers and now several years. Both Speaker Johnson and Speaker Mark Viverito and the 4 council members in whose districts the new facilities will be have all been extraordinarily consistent. Everyone believes this change is needed for the good of New York City. Everyone believes that the 85-year-old facility on Rikers don't make sense, and that we have to move forward with something very different. And we're fine-tuning, the final details, but I have no doubt that everyone's moving in the same direction.
The wife of the cop who was killed by friendly fire in the Bronx had told us yesterday that she felt that the NYPD needs to do more to address trigger-happy officers. Those were her words. I want to know if you could comment on her remarks. And she mentioned training also as a possibility.
She thinks what?
She mentioned training also as a possibility of a way of addressing this, but she referred to them as trigger-happy officers.
Yeah, look, I know her, and she's a very good person, and she's speaking out of real personal pain. My experience has been very different over now 6 years, having seen so many situations and a lot of body camera footage and other footage where officers showed extraordinary restraint. And we can get to the exact number, but the number of discharges of weapons in adversarial situations in 2018 by NYPD was, I believe, under 20 in this big a city with this many officers. I think that the training that has occurred, started by Commissioner Bratton and deepened by Commissioner O'Neill, has emphasized de-escalation, restraint in the use of weapons, a whole host of things that I think have made the NYPD better. So I think there's a real issue. We lost 2 of our officers. That's very, very painful. It means by definition we have to keep understanding what the NYPD can do better. And I think training is always part of the solution. But I would say to you overall, I think the big picture is that every time we've invested in training, it's had a very powerful impact. We're going to do more. Okay, who has not gone yet? Way back.
Mayor, what's your response to the folks from the No New Jail campaign the folks from the No New Jails campaign who are concerned about building new jails and whether, once built, those jails will then have to be filled. Do you have any concern about whether building more jail capacity will lead to higher incarceration?
No, I don't, and I'll tell you why. First of all, here's a city right now, 30% plus decrease in incarceration in the last 6 years we've been here. In terms of number of people walking through the door of one of our correctional facilities, it's literally half as many as 6 years ago. So the fact is, this is the way of the future. I'm absolutely convinced. I'm very proud that we've been driving down crime for 6 years. Extraordinary work was done before us. I'm convinced it will continue. I think as a society, we in this city want to end the era of mass incarceration once and for all, and I think that's becoming an American consensus too. I don't fear that community jails create an unintended consequence. In fact, I think a community jail puts the humanity back in the equation, because the idea here is that, God forbid, anyone ever gets in trouble with law enforcement. We want them to get a speedy trial. We want their loved ones to be able to visit them, which is part of turning their life back around. We want redemption. We want to end recidivism. We can't do that with the kind of jail facilities that we inherited. We need new facilities to keep driving down crime, to keep reducing the number of people who end up in a life of crime. So I actually think it's quite the opposite. I think these are the jails that are actually going to help us to continue to decarcerate in a very, meaningful, safe way. But to those who say we don't need any jails, that's just, there's no human history that tells us that that's a realistic proposition. We want as few people in jail as possible, but we do need to have something. And we know that what we've had historically hasn't worked. So some people, ironically on both right and left, sort of wanted to stay on Rikers Island. And I think that's a absolutely counterproductive outcome. Go ahead.
I wanted to ask you about the 14th Street busway. I know this is an 18-month pilot program, but will the city introduce more busways over the next year, or will you wait for that pilot to be over?
There's no plan to introduce anything like that right away. When I was presented that plan, I thought it was a really exceptional opportunity to figure out if this strategy would work. We had a situation that we had to make adjustments for anyway because of what was going on with the L train. And we had a question before us that was important to the whole city. Was there something we could do to actually speed up bus service meaningfully, given how many people depend on it? And what would it do to everything else if we were to do that? So I said, I accept this as a pilot, and only as a pilot. And I'm going to see what those results are, and it's going to tell us whether it's something we want to do other places. And some places might be ripe for it, and other places not, obviously. But no, the jury is out. We want to see what we learn from this pilot.
Mr. Mayor, there's a resident of Staten Island who purchased a horse.
Did you say a horse?
Keeping it in his backyard, and he rides it through the neighborhood, and now he has a
Did not expect this question.
now he has a goat. And the neighbors are pretty upset for a lot of different reasons.
Could you enumerate those reasons?
Smell, noise, etc., etc. Is that legal in New York to have these animals?
Nay. I don't know. Actually, I don't know if it's legal. I assume it's not legal, but we'll find out. I've been asked many questions. I have never been asked this question. I don't know if it's legal. We will get an answer. If it's not legal, we'll inform the individual that it's not legal. While admiring their love of agriculture, we will speak to them about it. But if the team will follow up with you to find out the details, and we will go talk to that person. Who has not gone yet? Where am I looking? There you go.
14th Street bus lane. What's your message to residents and people who work on 14th Street who are happy about the express lane?
That we're trying to balance a whole lot of different pieces here, and one of the most important pieces of the equation in this city right now is that we have to get people to use more mass transit. I don't know a single New Yorker who doesn't complain about how congested our streets are. I don't know a single New Yorker who's not worried about climate change and pollution. We've got to do something different in this city. And as we have done different things, a lot of them are working. So we've got to try this to see what it teaches us. And it's a very limited period of time. And we created a lot of accommodation for local businesses. And it's very important people to say this, you know, a car can come and drop off someone or pick up someone. A taxi can do that. An Uber or Lyft can do that. There's plenty of ways to engage the work you have to do on that block. If you're going to a parking garage, you can do that. But we wanted to create an environment where we could really test what would it take to make the buses run the way they're supposed to. So more and more people would choose to get on mass transit rather than use their own car or use any car. And that's something that's really crucial to the future of the city. So I'd say to the residents is we absolutely understand their concerns. It's a limited period of time. We're going to watch very carefully. We've tried to make a lot of accommodations to address the concerns. And after this pilot is over, we'll judge accordingly. Yes.
I want to ask your opinion on Rudy Giuliani. He's been all over TV, very aggressively defending the president. Speaking from one mayor to a former mayor, do you have a message to him?
Yes, I'll quote my mother. My mother used to say, it was one of her favorite phrases, and I've tried to remember it in life, including recently, and she would say, leave them laughing, which is like, know when it's time to get off the stage. And that's my advice to Rudy Giuliani right now. It's not working. Every time he opens his mouth, he digs the hole deeper. I think he should just step away while the stepping's good. Rich.
Mr. Mayor, are you at all concerned about the president's mental state at this point and whether or not it threatens the security of the...
Yeah, I've been concerned about that from the very beginning, but I think millions and millions of Americans have been concerned about that from the very beginning. It's a very serious, painful reality that we don't even know if our president is mentally well or not, given the power he holds. And I do think, you know, he's now under a kind of stress he's never experienced in his life, where, you know, the end may be near for his presidency, and I think it will lead to even more irrational behavior. It worries me deeply. I wish I had an answer, something we could do about it besides impeachment, but let us pray. Over there? Yes, right there in the glasses. Go ahead.
I want to ask about NYCHA. Vicky Dean had said recently that they wanted to go forward with infill development in RAD and Fulton houses. This is sort of the test case. And some elected officials had raised some concerns, and she basically said, let's stop delaying this unless you have a better plan. We're moving forward. We're going to do an RFP at the end of October. But then it seems like the administration has now stepped back and allowing more space. I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about the sort of change in thinking at City Hall.
I don't think there was a change of thinking at City Hall. I think Vicky was speaking honestly about her frustration that she felt that she and her team put together a very conscientious proposal, and, you know, time is wasting, and I think she was speaking from the heart. But I think it's really important to listen to elected officials. I mean, I was a city council member. I understand that local elected officials are talking to their constituents and raising valid concerns. And I've spoken to Congressman Nadler, I've spoken to Speaker Johnson. They're raising very important points, as are residents, and we have to answer them. So what we all agreed to do was have a process over the next weeks with community stakeholders to really talk this stuff through. And, you know, I think the concerns being raised are real, and I think we have real answers for them. So I still believe we're going to find a way to get it done.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to ask you about the rationale behind the new Joint Crisis Coordination Center in downtown Brooklyn, where NYPD and a number of agencies are watching the live feed cameras of the subway system to largely in order to address homelessness and other quality of life issues. What was kind of the thinking behind that, and what do you say to advocates who are concerned that it's kind of using a law enforcement approach to a social service issue?
Look, I think it's a fair question, but I think the advocates should look at what we're doing and how we're doing it, and I think they would be reassured. But you said it right in your question. We're addressing a major quality of life concern and a concern where a number of people need help. A lot of our homeless residents need help, and they only get help when we engage them constantly. And we can only engage them if we know where they are. I want to say that social services has done an extraordinary job. It's now well over 2,000 folks have gotten off the streets and kept off the streets and gotten to shelter or affordable housing and medical treatment, mental health treatment, substance abuse treatment. Something very important is happening, but it requires knowing where people are and engaging them. So what those cameras are allowing us to do is find people who have a need and try to address their need, and to address real quality of life concerns raised by their fellow residents, which are perfectly legitimate and must be raised, and also the rules that exist for the subway system that have to be honored. So it's all those things at once. But you know, NYPD has now been trained very consistently in how to work with, how to address the needs of homeless folks, how to work with social services providers, work with medical personnel. It's a whole different approach than existed in the past. And I think the advocates know that. I would remind them that if the public servants who are most able to address the problem first are NYPD and they're trained to do so, that's actually the right way to do things. Thanks, everyone.